Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending our webinar today titled Communication Matters, Speech and Hearing Support on the Telephone. My name is Annie Randolph, and I am a Neuro Resource Facilitator with the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa, and we are excited to share this webinar with you today. We will be recording this webinar and we'll have it archived on our YouTube page in the coming days. Also, we will save time at the end of the session for any questions you might have, but please feel free to type in your questions into the chat box as you think of them, and we will respond to them in the order they appear. No CEUs will be provided for this webinar. However, we will provide a certificate of attendance that will be sent after the session through your email. So we are lucky enough to have two guest speakers today, Lori Sporrer, excuse me, and Dylan Heuer. Lori is from Hamilton Relay, or Relay, Iowa, and Dylan is from Telecommunications Access Iowa, or known as TAI. Lori has had several roles with Hamilton Relay, including her current role as Relay Iowa Outreach Project Manager. She has had experience working on a national level at shows such as ADRP, HLAA, and Audiology Now. Lori travels throughout the state of Iowa to share information about the availability of relay solutions to people who have a hearing loss or difficulty speaking on the phone. Her outreach includes presentations, exhibit booths, and working one-on-one with individuals who may benefit from Relay Iowa services. She strives to be a resource to the community and healthcare leaders throughout the state. Lori enjoys reading, biking, and spending time with her husband, Tim, and daughters who currently attend the University of Iowa and University of Northern Iowa. Dylan is the program manager for Telecommunications Access Iowa, or TAI, and has served in the position since April 2019. As a deaf person, he understands the barriers that people with hearing loss encounter every day and is working tirelessly to ensure that there is an equal access to communication over the telephone for everybody. As part of his job, he travels around the state, providing outreach opportunities to those who will benefit from TAI. He currently resides in Des Moines with his new wife, and Dylan will also be utilizing Simone today as his interpreter. So thank you all for participating today, and I will go ahead and let Lori and Dylan get started.
All right, well, thank you for the introduction, and thanks to all of you who are joining today and learning a little bit about our services. We sure appreciate the opportunity to be with you all and have this chance to share. As mentioned, if you do have questions, definitely jump in, and if I don't see it right away, like while I'm presenting, I'll make sure when it's time for us to switch that we definitely take the time for questions and make sure to answer any questions that you do have. Again, my name's Lori Sporrer, and I'm with Relay Iowa. So I'm going to kind of start, but then when I'm completed, after I'm done, Dylan Heuer will take over from there and talk about his program. So we're going to both be spending some time with you today. Now, Relay Iowa, many of you maybe have heard of Relay before, but I'm hopeful that in attending this session that you'll learn a little something that maybe you didn't know before today. There's a lot of services that we have. Some have been around a long time, but others, maybe you just haven't heard about. So I'm planning to talk about all of our services, and hopefully you can learn something new that you maybe didn't know before today. So as we go through that, just a little background. Every state in the United States has a relay service. So Relay Iowa is powered by the Iowa Utilities Board, and they contract with Hamilton Relay. So that's why in my introduction we mentioned Hamilton. So Hamilton is the service provider for Relay Iowa. And Hamilton is actually located in Aurora, Nebraska. And has been providing service for many, many years. And we're the ones who are managing the calls that I'll be talking about today. So as I'm describing the different services, those call centers and those people who are helping with the calls are employees of Relay Iowa. And just a little background again, you may or may not know what Relay Iowa even is. And what we do is we provide assistance on the telephone, third-party assistance to help folks who are deaf, hard of hearing, deaf-blind, or people who have difficulty speaking on the telephone. So it's all about telephone communication. And that's kind of the theme of this session, is communicating on the telephone. Relay has been around for a long time, as I mentioned earlier, and it kind of started with, there were different relay services that popped up, mainly for people who were deaf. Once the TTY was invented, it was a machine that allowed, as you pressed the keys on the keyboard, they sent out a tone, and that tone could travel on the telephone line. And if someone else had a TTY, they could see which letters. So it was basically way before texting and email, there was that opportunity for people who were deaf. If they had a TTY and their loved ones had a TTY, they could communicate back and forth through those tones on the keyboard with the TTY machine. That turned into, there was an opportunity then to, hey, you know, if we have a relay in between there, people who have that machine can talk to anybody, and then the relay operator would have that machine and then speak for the individual. So that was kind of the beginnings of relay, and it wasn't available to everybody. It was available in little pockets throughout the country. And then when the Americans with Disabilities Act came into play in the early 1990s, shortly thereafter, the FCC said, hey, we need to make sure that everybody who is deaf has access on the telephone. So it was mandated then that the relay service be throughout the nation, and it was managed individually, state by state. So that's kind of a brief history of how it all came to be. It's expanded from there. Technology has changed since the early 1990s in leaps and bounds. So as I'm talking about the different services today, do know that that traditional TTY is still something I will mention, but there are other services beyond that for people who are deaf because of the technology advancements that can be used. Some of the services that I'll be talking about do use specialized equipment, and so I'll mention that. And of course, later when Dylan talks, he'll be able to share how in the state of Iowa you can get some of that equipment through the equipment program. All of our services are available 24/7. Anytime anybody needs to make a phone call, they need to be able to do that. So of course, our services need to be available for those folks day and night. So this just kind of shows all of the services that fall under the Relay Iowa umbrella. And note that we're going to kind of talk a little bit about each of these. I'm going to spend the most time on 3 of them, though. We're really going to spend our time with hearing carryover, speech-to-speech, and caption telephone. Because I think a lot of times people maybe just haven't heard of these, and they're more likely to benefit you know, someone you may know or yourself, depending on your needs, because they're our focus for hard of hearing and people who have difficulty speaking on the phone. As I talk about each of the services, you'll note that there's a communication assistant or an operator that is managing that call. And again, that's what Relay actually is. It's that person who's at a call center and helping with the call. And depending on the service, it determines what kind of help they're offering and they're giving. So this slide kind of shows the in-between part. You see the communication assistant in the middle, the relay user, and in this case, it's the traditional TTY. The users, in this case, let's say this person is deaf and not able to speak. So he is typing, and then the communication assistant speaks whatever he types to the individual that he called. And when she responds, the communication assistant types to the user of the service so that he can read it on his screen on his TTY. So that's the traditional way of the service. And as you're learning about the services today, I'll kind of always refer to, hey, what that communication assistant is doing. It is different with the different services. This is the kind of the traditional way. With some of the services, it is a turn-taking type of service, meaning while the person's typing what he wants to say, that happens. And then when he's done, he would say, go ahead, and then the person that he calls can respond. And so it has to be one at a time with certain services, but not with all. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about that. But just know that that's kind of what the relay is. It is having a communication assistant helping with the call in some way. And again, with the communication assistants, I talked about the FCC mandate. They, in turn, as well, they have a lot of regulations. And so they're making sure that our communication assistants are providing very accurate, doing all the things that they need to do to make sure that the call can be manage in the best way possible. So there's a lot of rules and regulations that our communication assistants follow. People who use our service, some of the services, the traditional ones mainly, people can actually set up user preferences that make the service more specific to their needs. The communication assistant really should be considered kind of like an interpreter, someone who's helping two people talk and have a phone conversation. Kind of like today in this webinar, we have an interpreter, and the interpreter is kind of helping with communication, but again, doesn't engage personally, but just manages, the communication back and forth. And it's the same with the telephone calls. The communication assistant isn't partaking in the call, but they're just helping with the communication flow. So confidentiality is a very big factor, and all communication assistants go through major training in that area and follow the rules and regulations around that. All right, well, I kind of talked a little bit about with the picture that we looked at before, how a TTY call goes. Again, that's one of the services we have. That's the one when I was talking about the history of Relay Iowa. That's the service that kind of came about first and that people were able to utilize if they had a TTY in their homes. And again, there are still some customers in the state of Iowa that utilize TTYs, and it's available for anybody who could benefit from the service. A lot of folks, though, who are deaf and who know American Sign Language, they prefer video relay and some other technologies that are available now, which is great. So there's definitely options. The reason this is still available is because some people still use it, and it is mandated that we still have this for folks. Not everybody maybe has internet access yet, or the option to have a webcam to use video relay. So this is still an available service, and again, that's the turn taking one at a time, and the user of the service would type every time they would want to, whatever they want to say, and then whatever's said to them, our communication assistant would type it to them for them to read on the device. Voice carryover is a way to use that same service, but the person can use their own voice and talk, but then when someone speaks to them, they would read it on the screen. I'm going to talk a little later about Caption Telephone, and that's actually kind of the service that has, in general, tended to replace this. So these are kind of the two I'm not spending as much time on, but they are still possible services that people can benefit from and available under our umbrella of services. Next, I really want to spend the time on what we have for people who have difficulty speaking on the phone. And, before I really dive into this, I kind of want to mention, what happens, when we're on a phone call, we are either listening with our ears or we're speaking with our voices. And if we struggle with hearing or with speaking, what I've learned in working with folks is that they tend to just slowly avoid being on the telephone. They maybe hand it to someone else who can be on it, or they maybe become a little bit isolated and just don't go there because it's difficult and it doesn't work well. So I want to just, before I kind of dive into these, I just want to share that, I'm hopeful that if you know someone who is struggling to have that communication, to consider learning about this, because being on the phone is still very important. It helps us communicate with our loved ones, even if the person who has difficulty speaking, for example, has decided not to be on the phone. If their loved ones and friends and family maybe still would like to, be able to call them. There's a lot of people that want to have that communication. It's part of what we do on our day-to-day. A lot of times there's so much texting and emailing, and when we still want to make that personal call, it's probably to someone we care about if we want to do that. Also, it really is a way to continue taking care of business. I know I've worked with an individual who was using the service just for the business calls. They had a list of things that she needed to take care of each month, and always had to have her neighbor make those calls for her, and then learned how to do this and really felt that independence of being able to just handle those calls herself with the use and support of our services. So just again, as we're talking about these, if you can think of someone who maybe could benefit, that's my hope, is that you can share that information, or if you yourself could benefit, to consider it. So for people who have difficulty speaking, hearing carryover is the first type of service, and it utilizes that traditional environment that we've just demonstrated with the TTY. But basically, someone can use a TTY or a hearing carryover phone, and they would go through our service when they make their calls, and they would not have to speak at all. You would just be able to type everything you want to say, and then our communication assistant would speak for the individual. And then whatever's said to the person using the service, they can just listen, because that part of the phone call would be open, and there would not be any need for the service. So it would just be the one direction of, if they have difficulty speaking or not able to really speak where someone can understand them, or not speak at all, they could just utilize the opportunity to type everything they want to say and make calls to absolutely anybody they want to in that way. The second service for people who have difficulty speaking is called Speech-to-Speech Relay. And this one's a little more unique in that there's different options. But in general, this service doesn't require any specialized equipment. You can utilize it with a smartphone, a landline, any type of telephone, and just set up a customer profile, ideally, and make or place calls through our communication assistants. And these folks, when the calls are routed to a speech-to-speech communication assistant, they are trained to work with people who have difficulty speaking. So they're going to use a lot of tips and tricks to really try to help understand someone who's speaking if they have difficulty on the phone. And the person using the service does need to speak on their own, but our operators can help by maybe muting out their voice. So when they speak, the people they call can't hear them, and then our operators determine what they're trying to say and then speak for them or revoice for them. Some people use the service and they just connect directly, but they want to have the speech-to-speech operators on the call to help as needed. So there's a little more difference, and those preferences can be set up in advance on how the person would want to use this service. And I mentioned there's no specialized equipment, but keep in mind there is an option in Iowa to use what's called visually assisted speech-to-speech. And that gives someone a chance, if they have a webcam and an iPad or a laptop with a camera, they could have a Skype account. And when they call through our service, it's still a voice call on a telephone, but when we answer and see that it's them, we would reach out to them through the internet on Skype and be able to watch them speak. That could be helpful, so that if someone is, they've been trying to say a certain word or say something and it's not coming out, and we're struggling to get clarification, they could hold up, a piece of paper and hold it up to the camera and write something down, or have a business card. So there's ways that they can use some visual cues for our communication assistants during that phone call. So some people like to consider that if they're using speech-to-speech. So there are those options in the state of Iowa, which is very helpful. And again, those are kind of the two things we have for people with difficulty speaking. So it's just kind of case by case on what works best for an individual. A lot of times we try speech-to-speech first. If that's not the best fit, or maybe their voice just isn't understandable enough for our operators or something, then there is the opportunity to consider hearing carryover as well. All right. So moving on, in Iowa, we have services for people who are deaf and blind. So basically, I just kind of like to mention that, if someone utilizes Braille, there are Braille TTYs that could be considered, or if they have like a screen that kind of makes what their TTY screen a lot bigger, we can do different things like that, and there's buffers so that we can, a customer could say, I can only read 20 words per minute, so I want to make sure that the words aren't coming at me any faster for Braille purposes, or even just for visual purposes. So there's that option. But a lot of times with people who have low vision and who are hard of hearing or deaf, we have a lot of things, and I'll be talking a little bit about Caption Telephone later, under that umbrella that can help folks too. So we'll kind of keep in mind that we definitely try to consider someone's vision. It's not one of the criteria of what our program is here to cover. It's for hearing loss or speech difficulty, but we definitely work with folks who have low vision as well, as the best way we can with what we have. All of our services that I've talked about and that I'm going, and including CapTel, which I haven't talked about yet, are available in Spanish. So we have bilingual communication assistance. So if someone speaks Spanish, and is deaf, hard of hearing, or has difficulty speaking, they can utilize our services as well. And we'd want to set up a customer profile so that we could always route their calls to a bilingual communication assistant. And in talking about those customer profiles, there's a variety of things people can set up, and we won't dive deep into this, but just know that we really try to make it fit the individual with the opportunity that we have under each service that we're talking about. Speech-to-speech is probably the one that kind of has its own little section of specific things that they can, a little bit more to fill out than the rest, just because we want to make sure that they're choosing to use that service in the way that works best for them. But just different things like greetings and messages. Maybe if they're using the service, when they call, there are 5 people in their speed dial, they don't want to have the operator introduce the call at the beginning of the call. They just want to dive into that conversation with their loved one. But when they're making a business call, it helps sometimes to have Relay Iowa introduce the call. What that does sometimes for people, even if they have difficulty speaking, I have found, it just buys you time. There's so many people when they answer a call, and if someone's not speaking right away, people hang up, or they don't understand that this person who's calling them just has difficulty speaking, and to listen and be patient and stuff. So having that operator, our communication assistant, introduce the call and manage the call in that way is sometimes all the person needs, with the service. It can just be giving them that chance to say, okay, they know it's going to take me a little time to talk. Now I have them on the phone. So customer profiles are really great places to just kind of make sure to tell us what you need. All right. Caption Telephone. There's a huge array of options under Caption Telephone, and that, by options I mean we have landline options as well as some internet-based options. But basically what CapTel is it's an option to read what people are saying. So it's a specialized phone that comes with a screen, and we have different models. So depending on the model is how it would look, but what all of them have is a screen that provides captions of what's being said on the phone. And the people who benefit typically with CapTel are people who are hard of hearing, and or someone who maybe has a cochlear implant, or someone who's late deafened, basically someone who's speaking for themselves but struggles to hear in any way. So again, I work with folks who are just starting to miss a few things, and they don't want that to happen, so they like to have it as a kind of a backup to follow along and read the captions as they're listening. There's others who just they've tried amplified phones, and they've tried other ways of, hearing on the phone, and they just can't. So they rely solely on the captions and just read and then talk. The way the service works is a little different than the other call centers I've talked about. It's a lot more invisible in that if you're using a CapTel phone, you just dial out, and then via the internet, captions of what's being said to you appear on the screen. The communication assistant is doing something different. They're not involved in the call in any way. They don't introduce the call. They're very, very invisible. You don't even know if I would call you and I'm using a CapTel, you wouldn't know it unless I, told you. But what would happen if I'm using a CapTel and I call out, it's a direct call. So when you answer, I hear you if I'm able, but I also can read what you say. And what's happening to make that occur is our communication assistant repeats what's being said to the person using the service, and they repeat it into voice recognition technology that's matched to their voice. And then they also watch, and if there's corrections that need to be made, they make corrections so that it's accurate captions for the individual who's utilizing the service. There's quite a few features on the phone. I typically just focus on, okay, if you're hard of hearing, what can happen is you can maybe miss some words and not understand what's being said. You just might miss things. So the features that really help with that start right off when the connection, the voice connection. The phone has options for you to try to hear better if you're able. So you can adjust the volume, the tone. Sometimes that helps people hear better. If you can't, you have a second option of just reading the captions that are available. And then finally, actually, when you hang up a CapTel phone, you can actually go back and review the captions if you wish and save them if you wish. So that gives you a chance, really 3 chances to catch what's being said on a phone call. And that can just provide a lot of confidence and take away a lot of phone anxiety, just having those options available to make sure you're not missing what's being said on that call. Now, the next slides, I'm just going to kind of zip through them because I don't want you to worry about the different types of phones. We have different models, but the main thing is that there is still a model that's available that doesn't require internet. So it allows someone just using a phone line to have captions. And again, it's very invisible as well because the phone does the background. They call when you dial Pizza Hut. The phone doesn't dial Pizza Hut. It first calls Relay Iowa and then connects you to Pizza Hut, but you don't even see that. So it is still very seamless and invisible. The other types of phones, it's called, there's the white one you've been seeing on the screen, and then you can kind of see on this one, that's our latest model. It's called the 2400i. So if you get the phone, you do have a choice between the 2 internet-based models. This is the newer one. Some benefits of this one is it does have, it has a speakerphone and Bluetooth compatibility, so people tend to like that. They're able to use both ears while listening, but again, they still have the captions to read on the screen. All right, and then I'm going to not talk a lot about this because Dylan's going to spend a lot of time on this particular part, but just to let you know, we have the equipment program. So if you want a CapTel, or if you need a hearing carryover phone, or if you need an iPad, all the things that you possibly might need and utilize in our services, we have another program in the state of Iowa that can help get those pieces of equipment. So Dylan will be talking about that very shortly. I just kind of want to wrap up my part about talking, just to let you know that with Caption Telephone, we do have the internet-based model. So if you don't have the actual landline anymore, and so getting a CapTel phone maybe isn't in your best interest, there are other options. So you can actually go online and register for an account and have the calls be placed through the internet. You still would need a telephone, so you need your smartphone or your business phone, but the internet would place the call and you could have the captions on your PC, or you could have them on your smartphone or your tablet. So there is that option as well, because some people, as we know, do not have that landline anymore. Okay. Dylan's going to, again, talk about the equipment program, but just to let you know, if someone doesn't qualify for the equipment through the program, maybe they don't meet all the qualifications, there are ways to get the CapTel phones at no cost through Hamilton as well. So just keep that in mind. So now I think what I'd like to do as I wrap things up is I'll kind of switch the PowerPoint here over to Dylan, but does anybody have any questions before we do that on Relay Iowa?
I don't see any questions that have popped up so far.
Okay.
We could probably go ahead and go with Dylan. Hopefully there'll be questions at the end, maybe.
Okay. Thank you. I am going to try to pull up Dylan's PowerPoint. So just give me 1 second here.
Sounds good. And when we switch to the next slide, Lori will go ahead and run the PowerPoint for me.
Okay, can you see the Telecommunications Access Iowa PowerPoint?
Not yet. Have you hit share your screen?
I do not see it yet.
Okay,
I also have my PowerPoint available if we...
There we go.
Now I do see the TAI slide.
Oh.
I think it switched.
There.
1 second. Okay, I think I got it. Are you seeing the correct slide now? Thank you for your patience.
Yes.
This is Dylan, yes.
Perfect.
Go ahead, Dylan.
Can everyone see the TTY slide?
Mm-hmm. I can.
All right. Thank you very much, Lori, for your presentation. And I'm very happy to join this presentation to talk about the equipment distribution program within the state of Iowa. So essentially, we started through the Americans with Disabilities Act because we wanted to ensure that everyone had equal access to communication. It is a statewide program, and it is under the Iowa Utilities Board. Telephone companies such as Sprint, Verizon, AT&T, and the like, they are able to provide a budget for this program. Next slide, please. So what we provide is we provide vouchers for specialized equipment in order to ensure barrier-free communication access. And the equipment will in turn improve the individual's quality of life for anyone who is deaf, hard of hearing, or who may have difficulty speaking. Those with speech difficulties is incredibly common with those who may have brain injuries or stroke, which cause speech difficulties in turn. So this program could definitely be of benefit to those who have brain injuries. Next slide, please, Lori. Thank you. So the voucher that I mentioned earlier covers up to 95% of the average cost. What that means is a person who applies for this program will only have to pay out of pocket a very minimal cost and potentially up to no cost. When they receive the telephone equipment, it is that individual's to keep forever. It is not a loaner program. That would be that individual's own phone. You can also reapply every 5 years, meaning that if you initially apply and then 5 years later, if you would like to get a new phone, you can do so. And so if your phone deteriorates in quality, is broken, or is incompatible to you, you can make a special request during that time frame and you can get yourself a new phone and exchange the old one for an improved version. We also have over 150 dealers all over the state of Iowa, meaning that applicants can go to any of those 150 dealers in order to get their telephones. And I can explain how that works later on. Next slide, please, Lori. Thank you. And as Lori mentioned, we have a large variety of equipment available within our program. We focus typically on these three, though: amplified phones, caption telephones, and electrolarynx telephones. And the last one is for those who have difficulty speaking. Next slide, please. In addition to those standard telephones, you can also apply for additional accessories. That would include a headset, a flashing ringer for landlines or mobile phones, an amplified attachment to your cell phone or mobile device, and it actually works on a Bluetooth level, and then amplified answering machines, which is really cool because you can actually slow down the speed of voicemail, for example. Sometimes people speak very quickly, and you can actually modify the speed or the rate of the individual's message in order to hear it at your own pace. Next slide, please. Thank you. As Lori mentioned earlier, we also provide iPads. The iPad program is currently called our wireless program, and it's incredibly popular because with all the technological advancements, a lot of individuals have gotten rid of their phone lines. And so you can receive an iPad in order to work with your Wi-Fi. In order to receive an iPad, there is a separate application process, as opposed to the traditional specialized phones or portable equipment that I mentioned earlier. And there are different qualification criteria for each of those different applications. Now, with the iPad, it's a standard size, or you can also receive a mini. And those iPads will come pre-downloaded with specific apps that will in turn match that individual's communication needs. For example, a deaf person who relies on sign language to communicate would receive an iPad with a video relay service app, a variety of. And if you have speech difficulties, you could receive speech-to-text apps and have a variety of picture-based apps so that you can point to what you need instead of speaking. And so this is available for anyone who is deaf, hard of hearing, or who may have difficulty speaking. We have 2 dealers that provide support or assistance and who can educate you how to use the iPad. Teletext or RAS Mobility, and they provide support for iPad usage. Thus far, if you have any questions, if you could please hold them to the end, I'm happy to answer those questions at that time. Next slide. Oh, thank you. So how you can apply for this program, it's very simple. We have an application form. Again, there are 2 different forms, one for traditional specialized phones and the other one for the iPad program. Fill those out, and of course you would need to answer the qualification criteria questions. And of course you need to get a professional's signature. And once you have filled out your application form, you would mail that into us, or you could email it to us, or you could fax it to us in any way that you can. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, how to qualify for this program? For the traditional equipment, there are 5 qualifications. You have to reside within the state of Iowa. You have to be older than the age of 5 years of age, or be able to use the equipment. You have to have telecommunications services in-house, for example, a landline versus internet. And will you use this piece of equipment in order to increase ease of communication? If you earn less than the specific criteria mentioned here, you would qualify for these phones. Now, this is not a low-income program. This is a pretty generous range, but this is just for the state in order to regulate our budget. Next slide, please. Thank you. As far as the professional that I mentioned earlier that would need to sign your application, you would need to take the application to a doctor or an audiologist or a speech therapist, whomever the case may be for you, and that person needs to work within the field of hearing loss. They would need to sign that form to verify that you are in fact deaf, hard of hearing, or you have difficulty speaking, and that the equipment would make communication easier for you. Next slide. Thank you. So when you apply for our program, you can select up to 1 phone, either a caption telephone or an amplified phone, or electrolarynx phone. Select any one of those. And then you can also select up to 2 accessory items. And that could include your ringer, your answering machine, your headset, and or a neck loop. Next slide, please. So once you fill out your application and you send that in to us, we would process your application and create the voucher for you. And the voucher is as good as money. So once we send that voucher out to you, the applicant, and the applicant receives the voucher, they would receive that with a cover letter, and that cover letter describes how to actually receive the equipment. We would also include a list of dealers, so the applicants can select any of those to go to. Once they go to the dealer would work with them in order to fill out a form so that they can order the specialized equipment and ship that out to the applicant. It's as simple as that. Next slide, please. So this is an awesome program. I absolutely love this program, and I know many, many individuals throughout the state do so as well because it improves their quality of life for individuals who struggle to communicate on a standard telephone. And this type of equipment provides individuals with more independence. It makes those individuals feel more secure and that they're able to successfully communicate with their loved ones and not have to rely on other individuals for assistance. They can make their own doctor's appointments. Instead of asking someone, oh, can you make this phone call for me, please? They have increased independence. And it's a life-changing effect on individuals. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is my contact information. So if you would like to contact me, I know Brandy also has my contact information and my email address, and I'm sure she's willing to distribute that to this group for your usage. Our office is based here in Des Moines. It's maybe 2 or 3 buildings away from the brain injury building.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are in town to visit the office, go ahead and stop by my office as well and check out our showroom. We actually have a showroom within our office, and that showcases a variety of specialized equipment that we offer through our program. You can test it out, see a demo, whatever the case may be. Next slide, please. All right, thank you very much for listening to our presentation. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, you could ask myself or Lori. Please feel free. We are willing to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dylan. I will just give everybody a minute. If you have any questions that you haven't already put into the chat box, go ahead and do that. And if you're going to go ahead and do that, I just want to give you a reminder that to please reach out to the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa if you're in need of any sort of brain injury resources or information. Our Neuro Resource Facilitation Program really is designed to help connect individuals with brain injury along with their loved ones to the supports and services in the community that they're in need of. So this would be a service that we would definitely connect you to if you were having any sort of speech or hearing challenges or changes after your brain injury. And we can help provide that soft handoff to these professionals. I had the opportunity to go over to the Telecommunications Access Iowa showroom yesterday and was able to look around the different devices that they have, and it really is awesome what they are able to provide, and they're very, very knowledgeable and showing you what's available and how to use it and how it would help your daily life. So it was really cool for me to be able to go visit and see everybody, but also to see their equipment. That was cool. So I suggest if anybody wants to go look at these devices and actually put their hands on them and see how they would work within their daily life, to please do so. Like Dylan said, it is just a couple of blocks, maybe just a block away from where our office is. So it's at the corner of Hickman and 70th and Urbandale.
Yes.
So please go visit that if you want.
And let me know that you're on your way, and I'm more than happy to set aside some time and to interact with you, and I'm more than happy to show you our toys in our showroom.
Awesome. Yeah, like Dylan said, yeah, let him know before you head out that'd probably be the best way to do it. So I'm trying to see if anybody has any questions. So somebody does have a question. Jan is asking if Medicaid covers any of the costs of the equipment. So if either one of you can say anything to that.
Let me read your question. No, it is entirely voucher-based, and the voucher will in turn cover the cost of equipment, and that comes from the state. We have a specific budget allocated every year that will in turn cover the equipment. And really, the voucher covers up to 95% of that cost. So it is an incredibly low cost. And a very rare case, the applicant will pay nothing out of pocket, but generally you pay maybe the difference of $5 to $10 for this piece of equipment.
And this is Lori, just to add to what Dylan's saying for the relay services. If I maybe didn't mention that, so I'm glad you asked this question, but the services are no cost. They're all available, be it speech-to-speech, caption telephone, and whatnot. So
totally free.
Can you guys remind me also the applications? Are they available online on the websites? that someone can just print off, or do they have to call and ask for the app?
This is Dylan. Yes, they are available on our website, www.teleiowa.com. And we have 2 different application forms on that website. You can download that, print that off, and you can send those in to us.
Perfect. And I think I had asked you this as well yesterday, Dylan, but can you just remind folks of the length, and more too, the length of time that it would take for someone's initial call to the point in time that they have the device in their home and they're able to have the service? How long does that take?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? We had a little bit of pixelation going on.
Oh, sure. So the length of time, can you speak to how long it takes for someone from the point in which they call and send in the app, let's say they get approved, and then how long it takes till they have the device and the service going?
So you're speaking of a timeline. Once the applicant receives a form, fills it out, and mails it in to us, and we receive said form and start that process, we have to double check the form to make sure that everything is filled out and accurate. If there's any errors, we would actually make a call out to that individual to see how we could make those changes and see if they're willing to make those changes. Once the application is approved, we will send out that voucher. For traditional equipment, we send the vouchers out on every Friday. And for the iPad voucher, we send that out at the end of every month. So it would be the last Friday of every month for the iPad program. For the traditional program, those are sent out on a weekly basis on every Friday. So once the applicant receives any specific voucher, it's their responsibility to take that voucher to the dealer or make the call to the dealer. And so the dealer can interact with them, figure out what they need, order that piece of equipment and ship that to them. So that, and it really just depends on the dealer and where they're ordering that piece of equipment from. I would say on average, it's about a 2 to 3 week process, somewhere within that range.
Perfect.
And in regards to the service, once you have the CapTel phone, then the service is ready to go. You would go through a registration on the phone just by following along. And do know if you get the Caption Telephone, for example, from Telecommunications Access Iowa, I send a letter out to those folks just letting them know, who I am. And if they do need help or any type of assistance throughout the process with our services, that's something that's part of my outreach. So do know, even if you're learning about speech-to-speech today and you're thinking about it, it's kind of hard to look at the information that you learned today and just dive into starting to use the service, which you could if you wanted to, but I'm more than happy to work with you one-on-one, with you and maybe a family member as well, just to really practice some calls, try out, see what is the best service that you would possibly want to use, and just know that I'm here as a resource and can help with that. And Dylan and I both we'll make sure that you guys have copies of the PowerPoints. I think I saw a question about that, so we can get that to you so you have all of our contact information, so that if you do want some guidance following this presentation, that you can consider giving us the jingle or sending us an email and setting that up. Thank you.
Perfect. Let's see. Oh, Jada says thanks for the PowerPoints. Okay, well, is there anything else you guys want to add before we wrap up? Either you or Dylan?
This is Dylan. I think I'm good. I'm just very happy that you were able to join us today so that we could share information about our programs. If you know of anyone who struggles to speak on the telephone because of a difficulty speaking, or they're deaf or hard of hearing, your parents, grandparents, friends, whomsoever they may be, please feel free to tell them about this program.
Definitely.
And I agree with everything that Dylan just said. So thanks to all of you for joining today and for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you all for being on. Just a reminder, if you have any questions for us, feel free to give the Braille Alliance of Iowa a call. I just can't say enough good things about this program. The more I learn about it, the more I realize what a huge help it is to so many Iowans and so many people that I work with at the Brain Injury Alliance benefit from and could benefit from your guys' services. So thank you so much for spending your time with us this morning. As a reminder, this was recorded and it'll be on our YouTube page in the coming days. So please check that out if you want to share that with anybody. And then also we'll be sending an email after this with your certificate of attendance. So if you're in need of that, or if you have any further questions, just give us a call. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you very much. Have a great weekend and happy Thanksgiving.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.